In several weeks, Jews throughout the world are going to commemorate the destruction of the Second Temple by fasting and doing a number of other things on a day called Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av. This has become a very sad and serious day for the Jewish community. Since the destruction of the Second Temple back in the year 70, that's a long time ago, almost 2,000 years, every year on that particular day, we have remembered why and what was the cause of the destruction of the temple. I want to discuss today just a couple of interesting tidbits that I think that are not only relevant to the story back then, but also a message that we ourselves can learn from here living in the United States of America in the 21st century. When you were a kid, do you remember always hearing this very old cliche, silence is golden, and children should never be heard from, and always shh, be quiet? And even as you grew up, people always said to you, you know what, talk is cheap, don't talk, don't do this, don't do that. Well, for most of the time, I agree with that. Silence is golden. It tells us in the good book, Eina Medrisha Iker Ela Maisa. Study is not the most important thing, but action. Action is most important. And it is true that talk is cheap. And most of the time, I would say that you're probably well off by being quiet rather than being boisterous. But there are times when one must speak up. And today I'm going to tell you a story that is related in the good book called the Talmud that led to the destruction of the Second Temple, where people did not speak up. And because they did not speak up, the ramifications were very, very, very bad. Let me give you a little bit of a history before we get into the story itself. By the year 66, the Roman Empire had taken over the land of Judea. There was a civil war that was brewing between the Jews living in Judea at that time and the Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire was huge and strong, and the number of Jews living in Judea was not that many. But after several years of being persecuted by the Romans, the Jews had decided that enough was enough. We would like to gain our independence. Now, not everybody agreed with the militants who wanted to overthrow the Roman government and drive them out of the land of Israel. There were many people that took a position, hey, we're not going to be successful. You know what? We live under the Romans. They let us practice our religion. Let's not rock the boat. But on the other side, there were a number of militants that said, I don't care. No matter what, I do not want to live under subjugation of the Roman emperor. No matter what, I'd rather die than live as a Roman subject. And they gathered together their forces, and they actually fought against the Roman Empire. One of the most famous Jewish generals at that time was a fellow by the name of Josephus. He eventually wrote a history of the war, and in the middle of the war, while he had to give up his army and his post, he went over to the other side and joined the Roman army and wrote a history about this. So if you're interested in this particular part of history, of world history and of the Roman Empire, I suggest you pick up a copy of Josephus and read it. Now, while this war was going on and the fighting was going back and forth, there's a story that I wanted to tell you that really symbolizes what was going on at that time within the Jewish community and why God allowed the Holy Temple, the place where He Himself rested, to be destroyed. We can find this story in the Bible, in the Talmud, and it goes something like this. There was a fellow who wanted to throw a party. And he had a friend by the name of Kamsa. And he had an enemy by the name of Bar Kamsa. Very similar. He called in his servant and he said to him, my servant, I want you to go out and send out invitations. But make sure that only Kamsa gets that invitation. I don't want Bar Kamsa to get that invitation. He is my sworn enemy, and there's no way I want to see him at this party. But you know how things work, and things get upset. So who gets the invitation and who shows up to the party? None other than the host's enemy, Bar Kamsa. And Kamsa is nowhere to be found. Well, the host is furious at this. He runs over to Bar Kamsa's enemy and he says, "Get out of here! I don't want to see what kind of audacity do you have to come to my ball and my party." Well, Bar Kamsa says, "Listen, you know what? There might have been a mistake. I thought that we were making peace. I'm here. Why throw me out? You know what I'll do? I'll pay for my meal. It won't cost you anything to feed me." But the host was indignant. "I want you out of here. I don't want to see you. Get out." So Bar Kamsa tried to appease him by saying, "Listen, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay for half of the meal. Half. I'll foot the bill for half of the party." "No," was the answer from the host. "I want you out." Then Bar Kamsa tried his last ploy. He said, "You know what, host, I'll pay for the whole party. It won't cost you. Please don't humiliate me in front of all of these dignitaries, these rabbis, leaders of our community. Let me just sit here while we finish quietly." But the host would not allow him to do that. The host threw him out, had his servants physically pick him up, carry him out to the door, and literally toss him out. Bar Kamsa was humiliated, disgraced in front of all of these people. And he said, "My revenge is not only going to be against the host that threw me out and humiliated me and shamed me today, but my revenge is going to be against all the participants of the party. Everyone who sat there, all the rabbis, dignitaries, and leaders that didn't speak up, I'm going to get them too." He made his way to Rome, and he went to the Roman emperor and said, "Emperor, the Jews are planning a revolution against you. They wanted to throw out the Roman army from within Israel." And the Roman emperor said, "Come on, are you kidding me? No one wants." So he said, "I'll prove it to you. Why don't you send a sacrifice? Take a little lamb. In the temple they used to bring animal sacrifices, and I will show you that they are not going to sacrifice your lamb." And the Roman emperor said, "Okay, let me try that." So he picked up the lamb and he sent it with Bar Kamsa to the temple. Bar Kamsa did something very, very deceiving. He took a knife and he cut and he made a blemish on the lamb's lip, which rendered this sacrifice impure, could not be brought to the temple. And he knew that. And when he brought it to the priests at the temple and he said, "Sacrifices," they said, "No, we can't because it is blemished." And he took it back to Rome and he showed the emperor, "You see, they don't want to bring your sacrifice because they want you out. There's a revolution that is brewing." And the emperor then sent his army to fight against the Jews. And eventually, after many great battles and years of war, eventually Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple was burnt down to the ground, never to be rebuilt since. Now, I ask you, my friends, you in the viewing audience, we all know people like the host. We all know people that love to see people humiliated. We know people that are bitter and angry and love and just laugh at the fact that you're hurting, right? And sometimes it's even a second nature. You know what? I grew up in Montreal. Sometimes in the winter it gets, not sometimes, but all of the time it gets really cold and icy. And what happens when someone's walking down the street and slips and falls on their behind? What's the natural reaction? Ha ha ha! We're all laughing that someone slipped on the ice or someone slips on a banana peel. We all laugh. And we know people that love to laugh at people when they get hurt and love to humiliate people. But thank God those are in the minority. Most of us are not like that. Most of us are kind, decent, good human beings, or at least we believe that we are that way. We want to believe that inside of us we are good people. But let's think of the story, what happened here. Kamsa doesn't get invited. By mistake, Bar Kamsa shows up. The enemy. He sits there. The host, who is a scoundrel and no good guy, throws Bar Kamsa out of the party. Bar Kamsa begs and tries to mollify him. He tries to buy him off. He tries to pacify him by saying, "I will pick up the expenses. I'm going to be the guy that's going to be hurting financially. You have nothing to worry about." The host, being the rotten scoundrel that he is, being the bitter person that he is, throws him out. All right, but what about the 300 people sitting in that party? What about all those participants that were sitting and viewing this scene? What was going on through their heads? What was going on? Why did nobody stand up? Why didn't anybody say, hey, Mr. Host, hold on a second. You're humiliating Bar Kamsa. Look what you're doing to another human being. This is wrong. Now, maybe the host would not have listened to this person. Maybe the host would not have cared what anybody said. Maybe he hated Bar Kamsa to the core of his soul, to the essence of his being. But nonetheless, if someone had stood up and said, hey, I'm not going to allow this because I cannot sit at a party when someone else is being humiliated, I'm walking out, that person could have slept well at night. But no, it didn't happen. What happened was that everybody remained silent. Silence was golden, right? Remember when we talked about that a minute ago? When we all heard that? Silence is golden. Don't say anything. Don't get involved. Don't stand up. Don't be the guy that is going to do anything about it. No, my friends, that was the problem. The host, well, we have to deal with him on a separate issue. But I really want to focus in on the 300 participants because those are us. We are the ones sitting at that party. We are the ones that find ourselves from time to time in exactly that kind of a situation. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And what would I have done if I had been sitting there? We want to believe that we would have enough courage and enough gumption to say, wait, an injustice is being done right now. I want to put an end to this immediately. You want to believe that. You want to say to yourself, yes, my friends, I'm the one who has the courage to do it. But 300 people sat there and were quiet. You know what they're called? They're called accessories. Accessories to the crime. Because you know that if you see a crime, you see someone crying out for help, and you can help them, and you don't, you're part of the problem. There is a rule in the Bible that says in Leviticus, Leisamed Adam Reyecha, do not stand on your friend's blood. Well, what does that mean, don't stand on your friend's blood? You think that you're going to pick it up and you're going to stab somebody? No. Most of us are not capable of murder. Most people are not going to stand up and actually kill somebody. But what's going to happen is we are going to see an injustice being done. And what are we going to say? We're going to say, don't rock the boat. Don't get involved. Don't say anything. Don't be the guy that's going to do anything. 300 people sat around that table and watched the humiliation of another human being. 300 people had the opportunity to stand up and say something. 300 people could and should have done something. And maybe, possibly maybe, they could have averted a tremendous tragedy. And what are we? Are we any better? There was a very famous case in New York in 1964 where a woman got stabbed and she was crying for help out of her window. And after she passed away, the police estimated that at least 30 to 40 people, or maybe more, 50 to 60 people heard her cries. And nobody picked up the telephone to call an emergency. Nobody picked up the telephone to call an ambulance or the police. Because everyone said to themselves, I can't get involved. It's going to be somebody else. Let my neighbor, let the upstairs neighbor do something. When we have that kind of uncaring feeling, when we look at each other and can't have enough courage to stand up and avert someone's humiliation, my friends, that's when the temples get destroyed. When God looks down at the people and he sees that they don't care about each other. Sinat chinam, unadulterated hatred towards one another. That's what caused the destruction of the temple. That's why God allowed the Romans to come in and to burn his own home. The very house that he instructed the Jewish people to build. The very house where he revealed himself on a daily basis, where we actually saw great miracles coming out of that temple. That very house was allowed to be destroyed because people hated each other. They couldn't get along. Unadulterated hatred. Now there are some times where there's real evil perpetrated and we can hate. It's not good to walk around with hate, but there are times when one possibly can hate. A Hitler or a Stalin, these murderous people, I could understand. But when you're talking about unadulterated hatred, no reason to hate anybody, my friends, that's what causes the destruction of great societies, and empires are fallen because we can't get along with each other. Now we think about this story, and I'm talking to you about something that happened 2,000 years ago, close to 2,000 years, and you say to yourself, well, Rabbi, those were the olden days. You keep telling us about history. What about today? But is it any different today? We live in a multicultural society here in the United States of America. The doors are opened up for a number of different nationalities to come here and live with us. How do we treat each other? What kind of a society have we built here? Are we a tolerant society? Are we people that understand that every single individual person living within our community is of value? Every single one of them has some value? Or do we say to ourselves, you know what, I'm going to live in my little compound. I don't care what goes on around me. I don't really like the people down the street. I don't like the people across the street. They're all different than me. I don't believe in what he believes in. I don't have a life like he lives over there. I'm very different than everybody else, and I don't care. And if something happens on the block, if there's a fire, all I'm going to do is I'm going to save myself and my family, and that's all I care about. There was once an analogy given by a great sage who said a person was once taking a trip on a boat, and he had paid for his ticket and everybody was having such a grand time. Then all of a sudden, to the astonishment of the passengers, a fellow opened up his bag and took out a drill and started to drill a hole in the boat under his seat. When the passengers astoundingly asked him, "What are you, nuts? How can you possibly drill a hole in your seat? This is a boat. The whole boat is going to sink." His reply was, "My friends, let me tell you something. I paid full price for my seat. And if I paid full price for my seat, I'm going to drill a hole in this boat if I want to." The other captain came over and explained to him, "Sir," he says, "you are right. You did pay for your seat. Yes, that is true. But don't you understand that if you drill a hole in the boat, not only are you going to sink, but you're going to take every single one of us with you. And that we can't allow." In society, we are the same way. We believe, yes, we built a home and we worked hard and we have achieved, and I'm going to just protect what I have. If something else goes on around me, forget about it. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me. That kind of an attitude sinks the ship. We can only get along and we can only prosper if we understand that everybody is in this together. And when some things go wrong, when you see an injustice happening, you don't have a choice. You can't say to yourself, "I'm going to sit back because someone else is going to do it. I let someone else, what do I care what happens? It doesn't really affect me. It's not my business." Don't keep a low profile. My friends, that kind of an attitude allows a great community, a community that was in Israel for over 1,000 years, to be destroyed. What is the remedy? What kind of an antidote do we have for unadulterated hatred, for hatred between each other? It's very simple. You just flip the coin over and you say, what we need is avat chinam. We need now baseless love for one another. What do you mean by that, Rabbi, baseless love for one another? I mean exactly what it sounds like. I say do random acts of kindness. Give someone your parking spot. Do a good deed. Do a favor for a friend that you wouldn't have thought of before. When you see, the Bible tells us, when you see a donkey carrying a great load and the donkey is about to fall, help keep the donkey upright. Why? Because when it falls, it's going to be a lot harder to pick it up. So we take action beforehand. And the antidote is within our power. We have it within ourselves to make this a great, great community. A tremendous community. We live, thank God, in the greatest country in the world. This is the most wonderful country. I mean, we have so many blessings that God has showered upon us. We have wealth and we have an abundance of good health here in this country, and we have so many good things that we have to be thankful for. And we have to look at this story, this Kamsa bar Kamsa story, and we have to shudder and ask ourselves, how does it relate to us? What can we do to make our place even better? And we say to ourselves, you know what? The one way that we can actually accomplish this, the one way that we can actually move forward, is not by being that guy in the boat and drilling the hole, and not being the 300 participants at the party by saying to each other, someone else is going to do this. No, my friends, the way that we are going to do it is going to be, you are going to be the person. In a place where there is no man, strive to be a man. In a place where you know that there is no goodness, try to be the one that's going to be good. Try to be the example. Try to be the symbol. Don't always be a follower. Don't always look around and see what everybody else is doing and then follow suit. No, because most people will not stand up. Most people are going to be like those 300 participants and never raise a finger for somebody else. You have to be different. You have to really realize yourself that in order to make this the greatest country and continue to keep making this the greatest country, we have to get involved. We have to do things that make our life better. Otherwise, what happens? That we're no better than the accessory to murder. We're no better than that accessory to a crime that stands by the sidelines and laughs and snickers and says, you know what, I'm glad. Because in life, we're going to encounter a number of people. And the way that we deal with these people is really telling who you really are. When you see one of your friends are successful, what is your reaction? Is your reaction happiness? Are you happy for that person? Think about it. If your neighbor won the $60 million lottery here in California, what would your reaction be? Would you be able to look him in the eyes honestly and say, I am so happy for you. I join you in your joy. Or would you be bitter? And would you look at him and say, oh, it's horrible. I wish somebody else had won, anybody but you. What is lurking in your heart? Are you the kind of person that when someone is successful, you can't take it? It hurts you. It physically makes you ill when somebody, your coworker, got the promotion and you didn't. If you feel that way, then you're one of the 300 participants at this party. And you have to look into your heart of hearts and say to yourself, I have to work on myself a little bit. I need to do some spiritual introspection. I need to do inventory into what's lurking in my soul. Because if you're the kind of a person that is happy for someone else's success, you don't care. You make a lot of money and you let someone else make a lot of money. Then you're okay. You're spiritually healthy. But if you can't, if you walk around all day and you look at the successes, and it's not so much that you yourself want to achieve that success. No, you're still willing to wallow in the dirt. You don't want to get up off the couch. You don't want to put in the extra effort. And even if you don't want to put in the extra effort, you're still not happy with someone else's success. You're still not happy that someone else is doing better than you are. Get up. Clean yourself off. Dust off. Yeah, sure, life is not fair. It's working against you. Oh, we have that a million times a day. We can talk about how God has victimized us. But that's, my friend, not going to do anything. You have to first and foremost look into your heart and look into your soul and see what kind of a person you really are. Because when the test comes, when down the line we're sitting at a party with 300 participants and the host gets up and looks at Bar Kamsa in the eye and starts to yell and starts to say to Bar Kamsa, my friend, I want you out of the party. Get out. What is going to be your reaction? What are you going to do? Are you going to be able to stand up and say to that host, my friend, this is wrong. You cannot do this. You cannot humiliate somebody else. I, Rabbi Perelmuter, will not allow this. And even if the results are not going to go your way, even if Bar Kamsa is going to end up being thrown out anyways, I know in my heart that I did what was right. Because you know why? Because I've trained myself and I've looked at myself and I've told myself if I ever get into that situation, I hope and I pray that I can rise to the occasion. It doesn't happen by itself. It only happens after we are able to take inventory and make sure that we are satisfied, that we understand who we are and what role we play in the universe. We're not going to ever be the richest people. We're not going to ever be the fastest running person. We're not ever going to be the most famous personalities in the world. And I don't care, and you shouldn't care. What you need to care about is who you are, and rise up to the best of your ability. Because when you're able to do that, when you're able to look into the mirror in the morning while you're shaving and getting ready for work, and you could honestly say that you are the best that you could possibly be. You've heard that. I want to be the best I can possibly be. Then you know that at any given moment, when God is about to test you, when God is about to throw a curveball in your direction, you'll be able to hit that ball. You'll be able to look at it squarely down the pike and to be able to do what is right. Why? Because you've already understood that in order to take out the darkness in the world, to take out the evil in the world, what needs to be done is light. Spiritual light needs to be added in the world. And you, and only you, can do this. No one else can take your place. 300 people stood at that party, and not one person stood up. I would hate to be there. I would hate to look back later on and say to my children, why didn't I stand up? Why didn't I do that? And the reason is because, like we always say, it's better silence is golden. Sure, in most time, if you're in synagogue or church or mosque or wherever you are, silence probably is golden. It's better to be quiet and to do your thing. But when you see injustice and you see unfairness ruling the day, you better be able to gather up your courage, look into the mirror, look into your soul, and stand up. Because you don't want to be part of the problem. You want to be part of the solution. And when we understand this, and we read the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, that, my friend, is the beginning of the remedy, and to bringing in a new era, a messianic era, where God promises that one day He will rebuild the temple with the coming of the righteous Messiah speedily in our day. Thank you very much. See you later. Have a wonderful week.
Hashem, בחצוי סרקינו יפריחו